I would like to introduce myself. I am Fuja, the Faculty Relationship Manager of Moksha Academy. And to introduce you, we have Dr. Srilata today. So, Dr. Srilata is a well-known pulmonologist. Ma'am has completed her MBBS from Sri B.M. Patil Medical College, Karnataka, and MD in tuberculosis and respiratory medicine from JSS Medical College and Hospital. Ma'am has 5+ years of teaching experience in tuberculosis and respiratory medicine. She has done some additional training like asthma and COPD course at European Respiratory System. So, ma'am, I welcome you to our platform.
Thank you so much, Pooja.
The students who we have today here with us have recently appeared undergraduate NEET examination, and they are all aspiring to become MBBS physicians, either in India or in abroad. What we are doing here is, we are running a PG career series for them by introducing every specialization and giving them a roadmap, sharing them the actual lifestyle and career journey with that content. You can share your success journey with our aspiring students. And as you know, every doctor has their unique journey. So students are here to listen to your unique journey.
Okay, I'll be so glad to share my journey with you all. Thank you so much for this invitation as a guest lecturer at the Moksha Academy team. And also, I think my knowledge and my journey will help all the aspiring students to choose their specialty.
Definitely, ma'am. So let's just begin. So the very first question I have for you, also students, just to tell you that we'll be doing the same as we do in every session. First, I'll be just asking quick questions to ma'am, the basic questions, and then you can write if you have any queries. You can keep writing it in the question panel, and then we'll take up the questions at the end of the session. So, ma'am, the very first question what I have today is, at what time, what was the reason, why did you choose to become an MBBS physician?
Okay, I think back then during PUC first year, second year, we had only two options. Either you go and become a doctor or you be an engineer. So we didn't have more of options then. And doctor being the most respectful and dignified profession where you have job security, and also my passion towards medicine and obsession towards learning new things every day and solving puzzles and these things at that time, and my interest towards biology, physics, chemistry, and also I had inspiration from my parents, that because I come from a background where my parents are non-doctors, and I was the first generation of starting the journey with doctor profession. And so then they had a dream that I should be a doctor. And so meanwhile also my personality during my schooling or during the first few pre-university exams, that is when you decide what you want to be, because that is the turning point of anybody's life, that what you choose to be is what you stay throughout the life. And that is when I decided, okay, fine, let me try, give my best, and then let's see if I get doctor to MBBS seat, then definitely I would go for that, or engineer. The only thing what I decided then was, whatever I would go for, it would be the best profession and give my best at that time. And everybody who prepares for to get to be a doctor at that time, I think only few of them will go through, pave the pathway to take a seat in MBBS. For me, I think I was fortunate enough that my preparation met the opportunity of me being the doctor.
Amazing. Like, it is definitely, a very inspirational thing, because, what we have learned and what we have seen in the past, only those children become doctors whose parents, basically whose background is from medicine. So definitely in today's generation, it is very inspiring. So thank you so much, ma'am. And the next question I have is like, so if we talk about the 24 hours of a day, like what is your daily routine, roles and responsibilities as a specialist, and like how do you start your day and how do you end your day? What are your weekend plans and etc. So if you can just share that with us.
Okay, my day starts with at around 8:30, 9 p.m. and it starts with ICU rounds because we start with critical care cases. And then if there are any procedures like bronchoscopy or thoracoscopy, or we have any aspirations or ICD insertions, so that is when we finished in the morning session. And then we have our rounds, board rounds, where we students are there, where we teach them clinical cases, where they present the history, and we go through a process where patient and the student interaction and how they should learn a case and how to present it. That's what we go through it. And then probably will followed by OPD cases, and in the end, in the noon, we may have classes, theory classes for UG students. Finally, we end up with a review in ICU cases and references. This is how I end, and then after that I start up with my clinic and I finish off by now, like at 8 p.m. I'm done with it. So my weekend plans is nothing special. Usually we have conferences to attend, and I update myself every day with the new researchers and advances in respiratory medicine. And at least I read for half an hour to 40 minutes each day, so that it is like a thing that you forget things. So every case I solve or every case I see, and if there is any interesting case, I go back and again study that and then see that what better can be done to that case. So this is how it starts and ends.
I totally agree that reading the case again and again definitely gives you a better perspective for the different case. So, ma'am, at what time in your life, like what was that one point where you're doing your MBBS? So, when did you decided to choose pulmonologist as your, specialty?
When I joined, I think nobody knew about MD pulmonology because we had this diploma in chest and diseases, TB and chest diseases. We call it as DTCD. So that was the first thing it started with, where PGs do 2 years of post graduation, and they are to work in a sanatorium and treat TB cases. That was what it started with. But I was second batch of MD pulmonary medicine. So there were only few seats in Karnataka. Even Bangalore Medical College, Mysore Medical College didn't have MD pulmonary medicine. They had DTCD only. And JSS Mysore being deemed had started with second with DNB and then shifted to MD pulmonary medicine, which was and I was the second batch over there. So probably my one concept of choosing a specialty was you choose a specialty where there are less seats, so that you have high demand and you'll be learning new things in that specialty. So probably that is one of the reason of me choosing this specialty at that time, that I'm getting a seat which is directly super specialty, and I need not do MD medicine, then do 3 years, and then 3 years of DM cardiology or anything else. And this subject is quite interesting, it can be in the form of examination or anything. So this interest was started when I was giving my exams during my MBBS final years, and both my cases, short case and long case, was respiratory case. And I always used to come to a diagnosis with all this examination, because it is the complicated examination what you can go for respiratory system compared to other systems to come to a diagnosis, right diagnosis at that time. So that is how I decided probably I can go for MD pulmonary medicine, but you have to work hard for that. It is very difficult to get pulmonary medicine, though now we have many seats. in each colleges we have, even all the colleges, they have made compulsory that you have to have a pulmonary medicine department, and you need PGs, 2 to 4 PGs. Now almost 4 seats are there in most of the colleges, so you have options of joining over there also, and it is the best branch you can go for without going for super specialization, and you can go directly as a MD pulmonary medicine.
Okay, great, ma'am. Thank you. Really nice, inspiring answer. So the next question, I have for you is, like for every doctor, every case is very special. So if you would like to share, any experience of your memorable, might be good experience or a challenging experience, which you can share with the students and us.
I think during my PG days, because what happens is when you are in the first year or second batch, then you'll not have your senior most to guide you. So what they would do is, my department was the best department in JSS University, that is pulmonary medicine. So I choose to take over there. And other thing is, when you are in that department during your second year and final year, they just leave you that you take care of your case, because after this you are going to be independent. You'll not have a backup. So that is when they just leave you, that you go, you see your cases, you solve it, you read, and so that you can keep that in your mind. If you do it by yourself reading, then you'll know that what you should do at the time, because it is an emergency, more of emergency. They will be calling you anytime in the day and night at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So at that time, you should be prepared to go and treat that case at that moment. So during that time, what happened is, one of the case which I want to share with you, which is also published in one of the Journal of Respiratory Medicine, International Journal. So one of the case who had skin lesions, usually she was around 22 years, female, had skin lesions over her upper arms and lower arms, which was refractory to treatment over a period of 2 years. And she was on regular follow-up with a dermatologist in JSS only. And then after 2 years of she not responding to any of the medicines, topical medicines or oral medicines in the department, she complained of breathlessness. So that is when they referred that case to our department. And there I got a chest x-ray done, and there was a huge mass sitting in the mediastinum in the chest x-ray. So at that time, what it was means, you need to go through your own case. That is, if you see anything like that, which is huge mass or anything abnormal, you have to go and meet a radiologist, discuss with him regarding the case. So I went there, I discussed the case, and we got a CT scan, and also we got a CT guided FNSU of that case, and it came out to be Hodgkin's lymphoma. Well, we were also curious, like, why is it like skin lesions and Hodgkin's lymphoma? So then we got a biopsy of the skin, and we got to know that it is prurigo nodularis. So um, this is all interlinked, that any skin lesion which is not responding to the treatment over a period of time, you have to rule out systemic causes. That is, this is an accidental discovery. And then she went through a process of surgery, removal of the mass through a CT surgeon, and then chemotherapy, sessions of chemotherapy, and she's doing great right now. So this was my first case which I have encountered during my PG days, and also published this case, because most of them, they just keep on treating a case without knowing what is the root cause. And so the take home message of this case is, anybody who comes with skin lesions which is not responding with normal treatment over a period of time, 1 or 2 years, then you have to rule out systemic thing, and also rule out Hodgkin's lymphoma.
I'm so glad to know that she's doing fine now, and definitely every patient is important to a doctor. So, ma'am, my next question, which I'll put up to you, is like, with your busy schedule, like, how do you manage your time with your family? Like, you are into a very unknown specialized field. So, how do you manage your weekends with work and family together?
I think you have to balance both the things. You cannot tell that I'll not look after my family, and this is because you have your kids, you have your family, you have your parents, so you have to give time to that. Because see, when you treat a patient, they come back to you with smiling faces, and in return you get happy, and that is the sense of satisfaction which you cannot gain from anything else in this world. But also when you finish off your work throughout the day and when you get back, see, most of the time most of the doctors do not get back to home while their kids are still not yet slept. So this is the time what you should do is at least give, when you go back home you can see that smile onto your kid's face, and that is also a sense of satisfaction. But what I choose to be is I want both the things, both the kind of happiness, and so I have scheduled my timing in such a way that I give time to my family as well as my profession equally, and I prioritize them equally, not that my profession is on top and the family is low. And also my life, like taking care of myself and doing some kind of exercise, and this is also very important. You should not only do your work, you should also see that what you are doing, you are eating food at right time, you are doing your schedules properly, you are giving time for everything. So it should be in a way of all rounder, that you are doing everything at times. But sometimes you do have lot of work where you cannot give that much of time, but you have to manage somehow at those times. But I think most of the days you have to give time to both the things.
Definitely, students have a tip for you, and I totally agree with Dr. Sheelata that you should basically know how to, manage your time, and you should have the time management skill. Definitely, everything should be a priority, even work and family as well. So, thank you, ma'am. It was really a nice and interesting response. So, the next question which I have for you is like these students are right now getting into their MBBS, right? So they'll be completing their MBBS after 5 years. So what do you think? Like, how are you? How is your specialization prospect in India or in abroad?
Okay, in India, see, it's not only MD pulmonary medicine. There are also subspecialties like I am interested in. So I'm mainly in allergy, immunology, sleep medicine, and rehabilitation. This is what is the subspecialty which I'm interested in. So you have multiple subspecialties, like you can do, if you are doing from a good medical college, then you'll have all these things covered in that. But if you're doing in a medical college where there is no bronchoscopy or interventional pulmonology, so you have to do a fellowship of it and you can go for it. Uh, there are clinics in different medical college, if it is AIMS or it can be in Bombay. So different metropolitan cities have their own sub branches from pulmonology, which we call it as sleep medicine clinic or allergy clinic or pulmonary surgery clinic. So these are the subspecialty clinic which you can choose. And the same thing goes abroad. So if you want to do pulmonary medicine other than India, then please do it after you finish your internship. Do not do over here and then go, because you have to clear off your exams. Even if you do pulmonary medicine over here, you have to clear off their exams and then go. So if you are starting, you are interested and you want to start, you finish off your MD, you finish off your internship and try joining pulmonary medicine. Or if you have already, that is the second day that I'll tell next, when you finish off or you want to do any other specialities. But abroad you have specific clinics, like your pulmonary vasculitis is one of the clinic, interstitial lung disease is a clinic, pulmonary hypertension is a clinic. So you have again deep down into the specialty, you have separate clinics over there in abroad. And also mainly we have lung transplantation, that is also a very good branch, after which most of the pulmonologists do. And also rehabilitation, this is also major branch which we see abroad compared to in India. So India, there are only few medical college or corporate colleges who perform these procedures, and they are into these specialties, because this branch is still evolving. You know, you are still learning things, you are still exploring like what are the sub branches and what all you want to go. And I think if you are a MBBS students and you want to go to something like a super specialty with with a domain where you want to go into a subspecialty, then I think this is the right profession you can go ahead with.
Okay. So, ma'am, the next question, as you mentioned, like you daily on daily basis, you read about new fields of research and happening, in your specialty. So, what are the new fields or research happening in your specialty as of now, if you can share?
Okay, mainly I think lung transplantation is what has come to an extent, because before this, I think 10 years ago, we had only 65 to 75% of success rates, or compared to what we do right now, it is almost 95% success rate. That is for 1 year survival rate is increased compared to the previous what we were seeing 10 years ago. And now most of them are getting it done. Another thing is, this is about the intervention and the lung transplantation, but other things what is under now is the anti-allergics, immunotherapy, and immunological drugs are still under research, because I was a part of anti-allergic treatment also, and also COVID anti-COVID treatment medicines for the lung fibrosis. See, there are so many changes due to this COVID era. There are so many lung changes, which is a challenge for a pulmonologist to treat. So these things were the upcoming research for us now. And also into these subspecialties, what I told, interventional pulmonology, there are a lot of scopies and lot of rigid bronchoscopy, there cryotherapy, bronchial thermoplasty. So these are different kinds of interventional pulmonology is what is there. And different modalities, like different drugs, what are the different, or the drug delivery systems. This is what is the new and upcoming thing which is happening in pulmonology, because yet it is yet to be evolved. You don't know whether because it is all patient oriented and how you do research. So now it's all like our generation doing a research and coming up with these medicines or technology. So this is how I think it will still take time for it to evolve and come to a state where that yes, everything is done now, and we'll come to a status quo state.
Okay. So, I guess, students, you know that research is really very important even after you become a doctor. So, ma'am, why should young doctors pick up your specialty?
Probably, I think, see, anybody who don't want to do skip the general medicine and go to super specialty, you can opt for this subject. See, it's like you are saving your time, right? You directly go to a super specialty branch, because there is nowhere a super specialty, direct super specialty branch. You have to do general medicine, then do cardiology, neurology, nephrology. But here you're getting direct MD pulmonology. I think that is the best thing you can go. That is the first reason you can go. And also the interest towards this subject. If you, because there are a lot of branches after you go to this. If you're interested in critical care, you can join after MD medicine. If you're interested in intervention, that is surgical skills you have, you can go for interventional pulmonology. If you want to go into core subjects like allergy or sleep medicine, you can go for that. Or you want to go for lungs transplantation, more of CTVS kind of thing, you can go. And also there is an option of you going for DM cardiology after doing MD pulmonary medicine. But I don't believe that you will be doing the justice if you do MD internal medicine and then do a DM pulmonary medicine, or you're doing an MD pulmonary medicine and DM pulmonary medicine. That also most of few of my colleagues have done, because you'll be reading the same thing. You'll not be reading anything different from what you have read during your PG of doing your masters in pulmonary medicine. So I think this is an end branch where it is still evolving, and also you can be a part of this evolving subject and in demand subject for anywhere you go in the world. It is in demand subject right now. Due to COVID, it is more recognized, and also people are recognizing that who is a pulmonologist. I think now also most of the people here in India don't know who is a pulmonologist. They go to an internal medicine only or to a physician. But right now, after this COVID era, people have started noticing that yes, there is a subject called as pulmonary medicine, and you have to go and show to this doctor for any symptoms, respiratory symptoms. So this is how it is changing. I think you can be a part of this, and also as there is one doctor to 1,000 people. So here in India, it is like 0.6 to a ratio of 1,000. So definitely there is a scarcity of doctors in India and also few other countries. So you can opt for this subject definitely.
Okay, so ma'am, just if you can share, like what was the experience during the COVID and the post-COVID era. So can you just share a bit of your experience?
See, COVID and post-COVID, during COVID, that is the first wave. It was like not that severe as we had seen the cases in during the second wave. First wave, it was like okay, the patients were responding and we were able to treat them if they come in the earlier symptoms. So earlier days of the symptoms, then it was okay. But what happened during the second wave? It was very difficult to manage because it. There was evolution of that virus to some such an extent that no treatment was working for them. It is mainly for those patients who had comorbid conditions like diabetes, hypertension, or cardiac diseases, and immunocompromised who were having cancer or who had other illnesses other than this, who were on chemotherapy. So these kind of patients were not responding well, and that these patients, it is very difficult to handle then if they landed up in very severe COVID pneumonia. So and also we were doing a trial of error of all the medicines which we were giving, but also the infrastructure and the treatment guidelines, we followed that, but we had difficulties during that thing because the whatever oxygen concentrators, we need the things to treat the case was insufficient for us at that time, but we had to treat the case. So it was difficult, and that was a very bad phase, what I would tell, because we lost many people during that phase. We lost doctors and also many of our relatives and all those people who were there, and it also led to more of a psychological impact in most of the patients after they lost their loved ones. Most of the patients who came to me was mainly due to post-COVID psychological disorders. This is what I'm encountering now, and rehabilitation was the treatment. Most of the patient, even now I'm treating COVID cases with rehabilitation, and they are doing really great. So these were the challenges which we had faced during our phase, because COVID treatment was the guidelines was same for all the doctors to treat, but the challenge was what you really do post COVID. That is, you the lung is already damaged. So how do you give a better quality of life to that patient at that phase? So most of the patient even stayed for 1 month, 2 months in a hospital, and then when they were discharged, so what all care you take, how you do, and how you come back to a normal state, that was the challenge for doctors at that time. And now also we are treating those cases. I think we are pretty doing good with those cases. Let's see how it happens. I thank God third wave should not come and it should not be so worse, because most of them are vaccinated. I don't think it will lead to so serious illness as in the second wave.
Definitely, I do understand it was a really, really difficult time for the public as well as the doctors, mostly because they were not even getting a bit of the moment for their own life. Their own they were also getting affected by COVID, and really, really a very big thanks to all the doctors for saving as many people as they can, and for their you know efforts they made their extent. So, ma'am, like my next question would be, what are the subjects important in MBBS curriculum to become specialist in your field? What should they emphasize?
I think generally you should know all the subjects to get any seat. For NEET, it is not specific subject. You have to know all the subjects to clear off NEET. But if you want to because after you have cleared off and you take pulmonary medicine, you'll be reading pulmonary medicine only. But mainly this pulmonary medicine deals with not only lungs, because other systemic diseases can also lead to lung damage. So this is how you have to have a knowledge of internal medicine, and also anatomy, physiology, then community medicine, ophtho, ENT, all the subjects are equally important for this, because it's not only, we don't treat only lung, we treat the whole patient, because there are so many systemic side effects when lung is involved, and also if other organs are involved, then lung will be affected secondary to the other organ involvement. So these cases we have to know about all the cases. Internal medicine is one which you have to know perfectly. You have to know physiology, anatomy, how the lung functions happen. You have to know the pulmonary function test which we do in physiology. You have to know all the things about it, because I have seen cases where even eye issue, only if you have eye problems, and you do not look into the lung, so there are so many uveitis, there can be any lesion which can lead to lung problem. So these are the things, so you have to know all the subjects. It's not like you have to delete this subject and not this. You have to know all the subjects in this, because it is dermatology, it can be radiology. Radiology most you have to know. Internal medicine, yes, you have to know internal medicine. Also pediatrics, because you sometimes you tend to treat pediatric cases also. And we have other specialties like anatomy, physiology is must. Other than community medicine, because you get control programs like TB control program or any other infectious disease, all kinds of infectious control programs will come in community medicine, so you have to know about it. So these are the things what you have to know in depth. If you want any MD, you want to go for super specialty, you have to read about all the subjects, then only you will be able to clear it.
So students, I hope you all now know that which subject, and I guess ma'am definitely said the correct thing, that you need to emphasize in each and every subject, as respiratory is a very basic and important part, from basic subject to the highest. And ma'am, what would be your success mantra or your message for the aspiring physician?
I think I have one thing is that whatever you do, you be best at it. That is, instead of doing different things, you do things differently. That is, you be best at what specialty you are, rather choosing multiple specialties at once. Oh, I want to do this also, I want to do. Don't do that. You be in one thing and be the best in that. Then only you will be recognized.
Definitely, I agree. Like, on two boards, definitely think your board. So, ma'am is absolutely correct. Choose that one specialty you are specialized in and you love to do. What are the struggles you faced in your way to become a pulmonologist?
During post graduation,
Yeah, exactly.
struggles during that. Okay, we were the second batch, so alternate day night duties without post duty off. That was the main struggle, because you're not slept. Every alternate day you have night duty, and next day you do not have off, because we were the second batch and our senior most had already done that duty, so it was left to us to do the duty. Then other than that is you have very hectic schedule. Any time you can get a call. So it can be 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Anybody is breathless in the whole hospital, they call pulmonologist. So even internal medicine, they do not see the case. They call pulmonologist only. So you have lot of references looking after, because I would say almost 50 references each day. You start your day with the ward, so it depends on what posting you are put on. So if you are in RICU, that is respiratory ICU, you have to be there throughout the day, do the rounds and look into the case. So once you're in respiratory ICU, you do not have only respiratory cases, you have neurological cases, you have medicine, general medicine cases. So you should have a knowledge of treating those cases also. You'll have poisoning cases. So all these things will have some lung condition along with it. So they'll be admitted over there. All trauma, even surgical cases like trauma cases will be given to a pulmonologist. See, if there is any fluid or hematoma or anything, they'll tell, okay, pulmonologist opinion. So this is what we were, then we didn't know that this is what it will happen, that every day we are seeing so many references of all the departments. So any department, any respiratory case gets admitted, they'll call you. So you should be ready for that, that all the time, that is 24 hours, you should be on the toes to go and look after that case. Because I have seen many cases, like if you delay, you cannot tell, no, 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 this is the time I'll take rest or something. No, it's like on the toes. You have to be quick enough to go and give that point of care at that time. So that is also very important. Another thing is about academic thing, research, academic thing. What I did then is I have completed my research in second year only. So I have completed my thesis 1 year prior to what, because third year is the time where you complete your research or thesis activity. I had completed 1 year prior, and also applied for the European Respiratory Society, and I was granted a silver sponsorship award over there because I had completed earlier and I submitted over there, and I was representing India then. That is then, because I wanted to finish off all these things so that in the final year I'll not be able to do thesis also and study for the examination and do all these things. I knew it will be tough for me, so I planned I put a timeline in such a way that I had to complete it earlier so that I give time to other things. So that is how I managed my journey. But it is an interesting subject, every time you're seeing something new, you're learning something new, and you'd almost see 60 to 70 OPD cases every day, and a single PG would handle that, single PG, because other PG should be in ICU and one PG you should be in OPD looking at all the cases and wards. So ward rounds, the next day it would be like you would have a professor who is asking you questions about the case. So we would start at 9 and 2 o'clock we would end the ward rounds, because that time it would be case discussion. Every time we would discuss each case what we admit, because we used to get all interesting cases over there, as that being the best institute for pulmonary medicine. We would get different kinds of cases, and also rare cases. We have seen multiple cases. So now it is very difficult to find those cases at this time, because there are many medical colleges, but back then we even saw rare cases more often. And other problems were like, I think this is the only thing, that doing night duty every alternate day without off is the most important problem for us, and anytime you will be called for it. But if you save life at that time, to that you give life to that person who is breathless, you'll be very happy, and also they'll be very happy that you have saved this. I think that sense of satisfaction, when you get, then you do not mind even to spare your sleep for them. So this is how I started doing my journey, and day by day it went on because I got busier, and this is how I managed at that time. But you should have that fire and focus in your subject to learn new things every day and study. And also I used to study those days every day. If I see any case, I would go back and study what is the problem, why this is not there, what are the line of management. So this is how I still recall those cases now, that yes, this is how we had managed them. So that golden period of you learning, do not skip it. Even if you have a lot of struggles and lot of problems, you have to do it.
Definitely. I totally agree with you. You should have that fire, inside you to learn new things and learn whatever, learn big, big, face the challenges and learn from it. So
Yes.
definitely, absolutely correct. So the next question we have, but a short description of how you manage all your profession and self time.
Self time, okay. So I have taken subjects like sleep medicine, rehabilitation, and allergy. So I am not into more into interventions and this thing. So my specialty, subspecialty, which I have chosen is more of a cold subject, but it is very interesting subject. So you will love it if you are going through it or if you are interested in it. So I finish off my work. Morning time is where because I start from 9 a.m. So before that, we have at least 2 to 3 hours time. So I give time to myself, yeah, be it food what I prepare or I prepare myself. I do not depend on somebody else. So I do it myself and I do exercise at least half an hour. So 5 days a week. So I do that and then I start my day. So once you start your day, you never know how time goes on, right? If you start and if you have cases one after one and you're doing a lot of things, then you are like done with it and then okay, study a bit before you go to sleep so that that retains in your mind. And I think this is how I manage my routine time and time for myself. The morning time is the major time I utilize in that.
What are the ways by which you try to release your stress and you stay happy as well? So can you share some tips to how do you release your stress, your patient stress? When you have extreme limit of no limit of patients together, so how do you manage that?
Stress, yes, you will have. See, there will be ups and downs, but I do not take it to my mind. I just tell, okay, fine, what does it, what more it can lead to, right? So you'll have stress, but see, I'll not think about it more. I just think positive. Even if I have something negative happening, I'll think, okay, in a positive way. So most of my thinking is positive. See, there will be many things happening in your life. If you keep on thinking that, it will again increase. So you'll have that thing of sense of thinking will increase in negative way. So always think positive, whatever happens in your life. That is first thing what I do. And second is, if I have a stress and tension where I'm feeling very irritated or not, then I always have a passion of other things, like you can indulge yourself in some other activity other than the routine activities. So you can do that as well. You can do some yoga, you can do some exercise. So exercise one is one of the most stress reliever. And also I am passionate about dancing since childhood, so I also perform some dances or do something which makes me happy, or something, cook something nice for yourself and have, or have a chocolate or have some ice creams which makes you feel happy. So you just change or divert your mind from that thing, and do not drag what happens in the hospital or clinic to your home. Never do that. So just leave there and come back and be a new person when you come back to home. Not drag the same thing and think about the same thing when you come back home.
I really, really appreciate the tips you're giving to the student. Definitely, what I think is you should leave your stress at your workplace and then come with a fresh mind to your family at home. She wants to know that how's the second wave COVID attack different from first one, and if more than 50% of lungs got damaged, is there any chance to save patients or to treat damaged part?
No, I didn't get you. If 50% of lung is damaged,
Ma'am, the question is, I would like to repeat, how's the
hmm
second attack different from the first one? And the second
hmm
part of the question, more than 50% of lungs got damaged. Is there any chance to save patient or to treat damaged part?
yeah, see, first wave, the virus was different from second wave virus. Okay, you have the Delta virus, the Gamma virus, the initial Alpha. So this virus has evolved. That is, it has come stronger compared to the first wave. So when our body's immunity is unable to fight against the stronger virus, that is when it got worse then. Okay, because uh, you know the viral thing, no? How is the this one pathology of the virus, how it is that you have spikes, you have protein. So some of the virus will go and bind to the protein, some of the virus will go and bind to the membrane. So it depends on where it is going and binding and where it is causing the RNA or DNA damage up until then. So this virus was evolving every month. So when it goes to a state where it is more stronger than the first one, that was 1 year before 1 year. So it is similar to an influenza virus, but this is a new kind of virus where we didn't know the kind of treatment, because it goes and attaches to the alveoli, that is the lung alveoli, where there is AC thing, angiotensin converting enzyme. So these all we knew, but the thing we didn't know that what treatment should be given. We had remdesivir, we had all kinds of treatment modalities, but we didn't know this is the treatment or this is the antidote for this kind of virus, because it was all new. And research takes many years to bring up a medicine into the medicine for to clear up the FDA and come and we start giving those medicines. But we started giving those medicines which were already given by other things, like we started with ivermectin, we started with doxycycline and all these medicines as a trial and error. Okay, this can work, this can work. But what I have seen is all the cases who have improved, it is not due to medicine, it is due to their own immune system. We just add medicine to avoid complication of the disease, that's it. So they don't land up in complication. Then most of them, they fight by their own immune system. So we just think that how stronger is the immune system. That's why all those cases, all the patients who were having reduced immune system or compromised immune system landed up in severe disease. So once they affect around 50%, I have seen even 80% of the lung damage have recovered really well, but it took time. So the time duration was more compared to a 25% involvement of lung. But if you already have an underlying lung disease and 50% like COPD or bronchial asthma, bronchiectasis, any kind of lung disease, and also along with that you have this 50% of lung damage, then it will be difficult for the patient to recover, and it can also lead to permanent lung damage. But most of my patients, even having less lung functions or more than 50% of lung involvement, have recovered really well. It all depends on how, because it was all like an attack at that time. That patient didn't have the mental stability, and most of them were thinking that I have seen that patient comes to me and tells, see, I was in this bed and in front of me all the patient died and I was the only one who survived. So this is what they came and told, that everybody were dying in front of me and I was feeling so insecure that even I'll go. So this were the psychological problems. What it is not only due to the lung issue, but also what the patient thought at that time when they were during the process of staying in hospital. And these were the experiences what patients have explained me or they have shared with me. And most of them have recovered. Nothing like that 50% they will not recover and they'll have, because it is an irreversible disease if you do not have an underlying lung condition.
Definitely, I would like to share like one of my experience. One of my very close family members were she had nearly 70% of the damage in the lung, and she recovered. Definitely, she kept herself very strong. She had a defined mindset, and she came back, and she's properly and perfectly fine right now. So I totally agree with you, ma'am, that own immunity does help to recover. And the question is like, ma'am, how do you, what was the major timing of the stress during the post-graduation program or during the undergraduation program? And what did you do to overcome stress and pressure during basic undergraduate program?
Undergraduate, it was like first year you have only 3 subjects to study, and second year you have 4 subjects, third year 3 subjects. So third year was like Okay, three subjects we would manage, but the first year was the difficult one when you come to a subject where you don't know, like lot of things. You have to know the course of the nerve, anatomy. You have to know this. You are going for dissections. You are seeing a dead body, so you will have that thing. But what I think is during that time also we didn't think a lot that yeah, this is what we have to do or this is what will lead to stress. We took it very like sportive thing. So because what we were then, we all were like studious to what our teachers explained us or told us, and we were ahead of what they were teaching. So if they would teach this subject, we would read ahead and go there. So we knew that what is going on over there, so we would not have a lot of stress. And once you know the subject before you go, then it will be a revision kind of thing when you go and see that practically. So this is how we were taught to, and we were interested in that kind of any topic. It can be anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. So not lot of stress, we didn't have a lot of stress, but yes, exam stress was too much, because what happens during exams is you will have very less time to revise. So that is when the stress starts. And you have every day, we had every day, and now you have one, after one day you have holiday for a day to prepare for the next exam. But when we were giving our exams, it was every day, 7 days you have to finish all your exams. It was like that. So then we would do group studies, always group study, or you have a partner with you where you just read and you listen, like, because you're already prepared, you just need to revise. The revision is what was the biggest task for us, to finish one day before you give any exams. It can be practical or theory. So if you do not revise, then no point you going there and giving exams, because you tend to forget, because there are a lot of subjects at once you have to keep in your mind. So we would do group studies, we would discuss cases, we would discuss about the topics. If anybody is read about a topic, we would go and tell them this topic I have studied and this is what it means. These all things. And same way, the other student who is your friend or anybody, they would have read another topic and they'll discuss the same. The benefit over here is whoever has studied will be revising it and they'll remember, then the other person who is listening. So in that way, this is how we started our journey. And more sportive kind of thing was there in us, more interest, that before that we will read this, we'll do that. And it was not like a competition thing that she's taking more or he's taking less, or nothing like that. It was like what you're best at and you do that accordingly, because I was more good at practical part compared to my theory, and I gave best at practical and theory. But theory, yes, of course you have to mug it and then you need to write and all, but practical was what I was interested more in. And even after you have a lot of stress when you present a case, right? Present a case and you go to a diagnosis and all things. What I used to do is, even after I finish that case history, or some rare cases come, some cardiac case with murmur, after I finish my clinical postings and everything, before we were done with the postings and all, I used to go back with my friends at 5, and 5 to 7 again we would go and see the same case. So we would study that every day for a week, until we think that yes, now I know this case, and the same similar case comes to me, I'll not have any tension. So this was the kind of preparation we used to do then. And compared to what we would study then and now, there's lot of difference. What I would tell you now, because then we were very much interested. Before the doctor asks us any question, we were ready with the answer. It was like that.
Definitely. Ma'am, we have the next question. Do pulmonologists requires cooperation of other professions, doctor, during surgeries, and are they always available? Usually, at critical conditions, what if they aren't? Does it make a stressful situation?
No, you do not need anybody else. It is your procedure. No, bronchoscopy is what you do. They'll not do. It's only pulmonologist kind of thing. You are not dependent on anything over there. Unless you go for general anesthesia, you need to call an anesthetist. That's it. Other than that, everything you can do it independently. You do not need anybody else.